Welcome to My Safety Tech Podcast with me, your host, Pete Thomas. Morning, Tim. Welcome to My Safety Tech Podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Peter. I'm glad to be here finally. We've been trying to do this for a little while now.
Yeah, absolutely. But man, feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, my name's Tim Absalom. I work for a company called Intuety. We're based out of Wales. Despite the accent that sometimes throws people, we are based in Wales. It's a tech startup that works on risk as an AI model. I know it's a bit of a dirty word at the moment, AI, but we have a genuine AI model that does the bulk of the work. I'm from a construction background. Really came into health and safety the first exposure I had to health and safety was when I was studying in college. Did a mandatory unit of health and safety. It was pretty dry, very academically dry. And in fact, after that unit, because I had access to the Act, I used to when I was a student, I didn't sleep all that well, so I used to pull out the Act and start reading through it. So that put me to sleep straight away. So that was probably the first part of the journey into health and safety. And then I suppose I've worked on an awful lot of major infrastructure projects and high risk environments, oil and gas, mining, a lot of infrastructure construction, tunneling, all sorts of things there. For the most part, I've been kind of a specialist in the safety and transport field, but I've kind of branched out of there. And I suppose the reason I'm at Intuity is kind of fell into risk. For a long time, I've had a kind of a mantra of getting everybody home safely, and that's kind of been my purpose. It's kind of driven everything that I've done since about 2010. It's just a really good point of focus for me. So every time I go and do something, whether it's a big step or a small step, I kind of keep that mantra in about getting everybody home safely to the front of the mind. And I've been back in the UK for about 18 months now. So I've yet to lose my accent.
You say back in the UK. Were you here before?
I was actually born here. So I left the UK.
Okay, I never knew that.
Yeah, there you go. I left the UK as a tiny tot. Lived in Australia and New Zealand. In Australia, I lived in Perth and Melbourne. But my work in Australia actually took me all around the country, which was wonderful to see the country. Half the time it was either in industrial sites, so you didn't actually get to see the sites. Didn't spend much time on Bondi, but I'd probably spend a fair amount of time within 5 kilometres of it at some industrial site to do with container storage or something like that.
That's really interesting. I didn't realise that you were actually born in the UK. Whereabouts?
Reading, I was actually born.
Strong Reading accent there, Tim.
Yeah. I just blend in with the locals down there.
Well, that's funny because I'm from North Wales, but I always joke that I have a terrible Welsh accent, particularly compared to the guys in the Port Talbot office.
Yes, it is very strong in that office.
So, I guess one of the questions that I have, and it's not even tech related, but how do you see a difference between health and safety in Australia and in the UK? I mean, both Commonwealth countries, so the legal system is very similar, I'm guessing, in terms of you'll have statute and then you'll have common law and case law.
Absolutely.
But how does that relate on the ground from what you see operationally? Do you see differences?
So I see them as being very, very close. So a lot of the systems. Australia is a funny one in that the health and safety is actually governed by the states. So I mean, you've got overall government oversight, I suppose, at a federal level, but then you've got these 6 jurisdictions that all kind of have their own little nuance. And when you're working kind of Australia wide, you have to know the nuance in every single state, right down to each one has obviously different legislation, but may also have different codes and different agencies that look after it as well. Yeah, so that's where it gets complex in Australia. Although there's only really kind of one amalgamated set of rules in the UK, they're actually very similar. So there's more similarities between the UK and Australia from a health and safety perspective than there is differences.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess when you look at Canada as well, the legislation can be very different depending on the state. I think they call it a state in Canada. So, like between
Province,
oh,
I think
province.
so.
Well done. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
something like
Sorry,
that.
I'll edit that bit out in the post editing. No, no, I'll leave it in. It's fine. Yeah, so they've got different legislation based on the provinces, and I guess we are starting to see more of that in the UK. Like, I kind of saw that it used to be the law in England and Wales was quite common. The law in England, Wales, and law in Scotland. But then as we've gone on in terms of devolved governments, like most recently with the fire safety legislation related to HRBs, Wales
Yep.
has defined a HRB as a lot lower in height than England has. So England,
Yes.
I don't want to get overly complicated, but basically there's differences between the two countries,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is understandable but
Mhm.
challenging at the same time. Like, I remember doing some
Yeah.
work. I remember doing some Legionella risk assessments in Guernsey a long time ago, and it suddenly dawned on me that the legislation is different. It's not. It's exactly the same. Like, there was no change at all from what I could see at that time, but it just said the whatever, and then in brackets Guernsey regulations. It was like
Yeah.
literally a
Yeah.
direct lift. But you are
Yeah.
starting to see regional differences in the UK now, quite
Mhm.
significantly in terms of recent changes.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I suppose there is a benefit to keeping everything the same, and I mean, although Australia is quite disparate in their legislation, the rules are generally the same. Sometimes one will introduce something, for very good reason. Just trying to think of the industrial manslaughter stuff that has been rolling out across the country in Australia. It starts with a seed and then everyone kind of adopts it. But there's a slowness to legislation and government that can't be, you can't get around that. So eventually they will all kind of be the same. And like I said, there's more similarities than differences.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that I noticed when I went to the US, and I'm still getting on this global safety, because I don't know if you've noticed it, and we will get onto the AI bit in a second for anyone listening, but when you look at safety globally, it feels now more than 10 years ago, for example, that we're way more connected on LinkedIn. I am
Definitely.
way more connected with safety professionals from the US, from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and there's a lot more communication there in terms of sort of shared learning, shared experience, and sharing this information. And I
Yeah.
also
And that,
know
that that's a benefit. That's a good thing.
it's huge. Yeah, it's a huge benefit, but I guess it doesn't necessarily take into consideration sort of attitudes, cultural differences towards safety, and also the types of industries that exist. So when I
Mhm.
see Australia, and I might be wrong here, by the way, but it seems to me that there's a lot more, mining and like classically high risk industries that we don't necessarily have in the UK as much of anymore. I'm hoping I'm not saying the wrong thing, by the way, otherwise I get some hate on LinkedIn, but that's how it feels. It feels much more high risk.
No, no, absolutely. You're 100% right. And look, I suppose you're right in that mining is at particularly high risk, and they kill quite a few people even now. The one of the things that I noticed about mining and safety is they're quite often innovators. They're really strong innovators, particularly in Australia. So they set a very, very high standard, but they have the ability to do so because they are making so much money. So to them, integration or development of a new technology that keeps their people safer is not as they see as essential, and they have the resources to back that up. Whereas a ma and pa scaffolding company in the city doesn't have those resources to kind of make those leaps and bounds in safety. I suppose the advantage is that other sectors and industries can actually ride on their coattails, on the mining coattails. And often they do because, mines are funny in that it's not just a Rio Tinto or a BHP doing the work. Okay. A lot of people are wearing a BHP shirt or a Rio Tinto shirt, but so much of the work is actually done by contractors,
Yeah.
those massive, massive contractors. And when they get some learning from the mines, when they kind of organically assimilate some of those learnings, they actually spread it throughout their organization, which then, spreads to their contractors, even who are not related to mining. So there's an enormous there's a movement of information that flows down from those high risk, high innovation spend industries, even down to those lower levels. So riding off the coattails and standing on the shoulders of geniuses is not always a bad thing. It can have huge benefits to safety.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Tim. And I think you've hit on a really interesting point there. And I've worked in oil and gas before, and you're right. Those industries, they there are a lot of organizations involved on a single site. So I guess traditionally, if you looked at a factory and there was an injury, it's a lot easier to hide the lessons learned for fear of prosecution. Whereas I guess where you've got a number of different organizations involved, where you have to be open and learn, because you're not going to be able to keep a lid on the truth. And I'm not necessarily saying that people definitely did that, but we've all heard stories of this where you get a single organization that, we've had zero lost time incidents ever. You're like,
Yeah.
really? I'm not sure. And yeah, so there's this, by having a diverse workforce in terms of the number of different companies, there's this efficiency piece in communication and improvement through learning,
Yeah.
is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I've been in ICAMs before, ICAM investigations after a major incident, and there's been 25 people in the room, and I've thought to myself, how are we actually going to get to the source of truth here? Because
Yes.
that's just too many voices. But it's not just about having the voices; it's about having those sets of ears. So each one of those people in their organization, would have taken back to their organization the learnings from that ICAM a lot more easily than they would have if they'd just been sent the result of the ICAM. Oh, here's a 50-page report. Just read through it and make sure your company complies with. I mean, there is a power of just sitting there and listening to what the other organisations think of that situation as well.
I'm going to interrupt this for 2 seconds just to tell you about a project. Now, I worked as a safety consultant for a long time, and I know how hard it is to get good quality leads, good clients. I set up a website and got literally no hits. The counter went to like 3 people, and I was embarrassed. It was embarrassing how much money I spent on it for no one to ever find it. It was on like page 10 of Google Ads, and I spent a fortune on advertising in trade publications and never got any feedback, thousands of pounds. And then I had to spend money on making the advert. So I've set up mysafetyconsultant.io. It's a place where you, the seller, can interact directly with your customer, and everyone's welcome. If you're a fire safety consultant, a fire extinguisher technician, fire door inspector, well-being specialist, or if you're a safety software company that sells software to business owners, you're welcome to advertise on mysafetyconsultant.io. And what's more is there's a 3-month free trial. So please give it a go. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. And one of the things that I really like about tech, and we've spoken about a lot, for me, is about this communication and this collaboration piece. It's one of the things that I'm most interested in, is breaking down barriers to communication, whether they be commercial sensitivities. Because we've all sat around a table with other organizations, and we've gone, will you share your learning with us, and we'll share. And there does come a point where there's a level of commercial sensitivity where people don't want to share that health and safety information between large organizations. And I've always been really interested in how tech can help us to overcome this massive barrier. I see this as a huge barrier, but I wonder if, rather than jump to the end, because that's where I feel like I've immediately jumped to, we need to start from the beginning a bit with tech and maybe sort of piece this journey together. So should we talk about AI and the dirty word? Or
Absolutely.
Right, first of all, why is it a dirty word? Why is AI a dirty word?
Look, it's so commonly used at the moment. I mean, a couple of years ago, the word was blockchain. So the word blockchain, it was everywhere. It was in the general media.
What now?
Exactly. Everyone thought, these so-called, I'm going to use inverted commas on a podcast here, these so-called experts said blockchain is the greatest thing and it's going to affect everybody. Turns out that that's, although blockchain is a useful technology, it's not changed the world like some of these experts were pitching. AI is I think it's one of those once bitten, twice shy things where some people are a bit cautious at AI. So is it going to be another blockchain thing, or is it going to take my job? There's a lot of lack of understanding and visibility on where this AI thing is going to go. And, I'm going to say it's a marketing piece. So often something's thrown in there as, AI in order to get your dollars, really. I saw a photo recently of a Braun toothbrush that says now with AI. I mean, do you need it? Does the AI put into that toothbrush actually make a difference? Does it make the product better, or is it just a sticker for marketing?
Do you know, it's interesting when one of the things that I say about tech and AI is that I need I need to be ahead of the curve with this. I'm a safety professional. Hopefully I've got another 20 years in this profession, and I can see the digital transformation of our industry having an absolutely massive impact on what I do as a day-to-day job. And I want to be ahead of the curve. And that's why I set up this podcast. That's why, I've improved my learning on this subject, because I want to remain relevant within my industry and within my profession. And it's interesting that you mentioned blockchain, because back in, when would it be? I want to say 2008, I'm guessing, but it might have even been earlier than that, to be honest. Someone came to me, and it wasn't someone who you'd think. It was someone who was quite elderly, very switched on, but very elderly. And they said, "Have you heard about this Bitcoin thing?" And I went, "No." And they said, "Well, I've heard about this from a grandson, and he just sits in his room mining Bitcoin." And they went, "I don't know what it is, but I don't want to miss out. I might chuck a couple of grand at it." Now, I got no ideas if they became millionaires off of that. But if I'd have just gone, do you know what? I'm going to be a little bit more curious about Bitcoin and blockchain and crypto. And I'm going to, and I'm in no way endorsing people buying crypto, but just if I'd have been a bit more curious and just gone, do you know what? I'm going to put a couple of £100 in this because I can afford to lose a couple of £100. Let's see what happens. I'd have been an absolute fortune, and this is one of the things that's really interesting about Bitcoin, for example. And again, I'm not endorsing Bitcoin, but if you'd have put a bit more time and a bit more energy in, you could have realized a massive benefit from it. Now, where it is now as a day trading thing is completely unlike where it was originally, and who knows where it's ended up. But, Bitcoin is slated. It's slated when it's worth $19,000. It's slated when it's worth $68,000 a coin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's either, see, we told you it'd tank, or, oh, now it's overpriced. There's just this hype of negativity around it. And I feel that AI is the same. And no matter what the negativity is, it's still going to be there, and it's still going to go, and it's still going to grow as an industry. And yes, of course, we're going to get problems with it because it's a new technology. But that doesn't mean that there's not a massive benefit to be had.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm going to suggest to everybody is don't see AI as the thing. See AI as the tool that gets you to do what you need to do. And now I know it sounds a little bit vague, but what you want to do is not AI. You want to solve a particular safety problem, or you want to solve a particular business problem. Hell, maybe you want a holiday itinerary. The AI is the thing that's going to help you get to that point. It's not the thing. It's not the end point. And back when I was studying my MBA, I did a unit called business analytics and visualization, which was kind of where I got exposed to the whole machine learning and AI and that sort of thing, and wrangling data in a big way. And during that, I really came to understand that it's a co-pilot. And I know co-pilot is a loaded word because Microsoft went out and called it a co-pilot. But it's a partner in crime. So if you treat it like a grad, just as an assistant, you're probably never going to be disappointed. You'd never give, let's say, again, from a construction engineering background, you'd never give a grad a massive project without oversight. You've got to kind of treat AI in the same way. So tell it to do something, let it do a little bit of the legwork, but don't consider that the answer to what you need. You still got to go back and check it and refine it, and maybe maybe is just out of interest, you say, no, there's a little refresh button. Back in the day, when you gave a grad a project, a graduate engineer a project, and said, go away, deal with this, they'd come back 5 days later, and what they come back with might be absolute garbage and completely in the wrong direction. The cost to press regenerate, let's say on a Chat GPT or a Gemini or whatever or Microsoft Copilot is nil. So if you get an answer from one of those particular AIs, you can just press regenerate and see what else it thinks. It's going to go in a completely different way than the first answer. Too many people look at that first answer and go, it's not exactly what I want, therefore all AI is rubbish. Or they say this is the answer I'm going to use, whether or not it's perfect or not. So you've really got to treat it like a tool. It's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, I was just thinking about other areas where we've seen AI and we've seen this massive amount of criticism for it. And one of the things that I was thinking about was Google Maps. I remember when Google Maps started to come in and the press just were hounding it, weren't they? They were like, takes lorry into a bridge, take car into a field, and then there'd be like a picture of someone that's like sat in the middle of a field with their old car, like looking really sad, going, well, it said to turn right, so I went through a hedge.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And now we just rely on it as it's just we just use it all the time. And then it's got one step further with things like Waze, where it will start to predict where routes will be busy at certain times, and I remember that. And they were saying, well, that means they need to spy on me through my phone to know where they are. Well, now most people use like Waze or Google Maps. Like I remember years ago where you'd write down the directions. You'd go on the RAC website and physically write down the directions before you set off on a long journey, like M5, Junction 7 or something,
Yeah.
We just wouldn't do that anymore. And this is despite all the negative press, the press are just,
absolutely.
They're there to sell papers, aren't they? They're going to find the negative,
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. They didn't show the 10,000 people that used Google Maps on the day and didn't end up in a field. You're right. They are there for the headlines.
You were talking about data, and there's this famous quote, which I'm going to read out from Dan Ariely. Ariely?
He's a professor at, is he Harvard or Yale or something like that?
Yeah, it was James Pellet that first came on the podcast and put me onto this quote. And it's big data is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. No one really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they're doing it.
That is 100% right.
And I feel like that's true about safety and safety data. So, and you mentioned big data. Let's have a conversation about data and safety data. I mean, I've got my thoughts. What do you think?
Look, data is a decision-making tool. There's good data, there's bad data, but it's how you use the data that matters. It's not what you got, it's where you stick it.
Yep.
and it's as simple as it is. And we're getting more and more data. So people, I'm saying the collective people like we, including myself, need to become better at understanding which data is worth collecting, which data is worth using, and how we should use that data to answer the questions that we have. You've got to start with a question. You can't just collect every piece of data.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned with your conversation with Crystal Dandry, something along those lines about actually the amount of data that's been collected. Okay, it's fine, it's good, and it can paint a picture. There's a lot of data that is completely unusable. And I think you were talking about humidity in a incident report.
Yeah. I've moved on from this, by the way, now because I've presented this a couple of times at events, and I create this scenario where I say, it's a retailer that's using generic accident report, and on the accident report, asks for humidity. Was the humidity low, medium, or high? And no one's. Yeah. The question is clearly utterly irrelevant in that scenario, yes. But people are still recording it because your staff still see it as a question. So they're like, Dave, when the guy came in and punched you in the mouth and robbed the money from the till, what was the humidity like at the time? Dave's like, well, I was sweating like hell, so it must have been high. It doesn't really tell us anything. Turns out all of these assaults on our staff are occurring when the humidity is high. So if we turn the humidity level down, maybe that'll make an
Yeah.
impact. It's like it's there's no correlation at all. It's irrelevant.
Exactly. And you know what? Circling back to AI is wonderful. Well, actually, machine learning is actually wonderful at taking enormous amounts of data, whether we think it's relevant or not, and finding those correlations and looking for causations. But as I said before, if you don't apply some human ingenuity, it might tell you, look, all of these incidents happened when there was high humidity. But us as a human could go, actually, that's not particularly relevant given that 3 of these incidents were robberies and 2 was, I don't know, a lift failing, you know?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Another tense situation that you're probably going to sweat in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's about using the tools and the data, we're circling the data as well, to answer the business questions. And it really does need that human, I'm going to say the experienced human eye to kind of ask the right questions and probe those questions too. It's not about taking the first answer from whatever an AI or a machine learning or any sort of platform gives you. And that's something that our platform does is actually makes the suggestions. We could make a platform that actually just prepares your RAMs without your input at all. But something that we thought was important was that there's human moderation of that. So you can go through and choose the things that are relevant or not relevant, and have the platform and the AI model behind it learn about you and your situation a bit more and make the suggestions more and more relevant to your situation.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this whole data thing, I've been thinking about this for a really, really long time, and I think it's one of the areas that we've got a huge issue in safety. And this is in by no criticism leveled at the industry or the profession at all, but looking at the qualification route, if you've gone, by the way, there's always this thing, isn't there, about vocational academic? The two always compete on LinkedIn, and I'm always sitting there just like, why don't just do both? Just do both,
Yep.
guys. Like you do both, but you look at the vocational route up to chartered, and to my knowledge, there's very very little information on data. So we've got this data literacy challenge within the industry, and like I think, we look at leading and lagging indicators, but we don't look at what makes a great sample size, how to collect that data, how to ensure the efficacy of that data or sort of qualify its accuracy at all, and then what to do with it and what makes an adequate sample size. And another little analogy that I keep talking about is that in health and safety, we do this continuous improvement cycle. So we'll implement something and then we monitor it. And then if something happens, i.e., incident, accident, some sort of lagging indicator, I'll cut the leading ones out for now, but something goes wrong, we will put that in a spreadsheet, we will look at the data, and then we will try to implement, some sort of trend analysis. But this is very hard when we take it to a small company board, because we say, well, we had 2 incidents of this type last year, therefore I want you to spend £100,000. And they're like, well, no, we only had 2 incidents. Yeah, but the next one could be a fatality. Yeah, but we've only had 2. How do you know? And so it's very hard, I think, this continual improvement cycle, when we look at a lagging indicator, I struggle to get my head around it with the lack of data that we have. And the story that I liken it to is that, when you watch those adverts on TV and they're like, Head and Shoulders, out of a survey conducted of Head and Shoulders users, 85% said it visibly removed the signs of dandruff flakes, right? And then it's got little asterisks, and on the bottom it says out of a survey of 2,500 people, right? If it said out of a survey of 12 people, you would go, well, that's pretty rubbish. It's 12 people.
Yeah.
There's not a big enough sample size. There's not enough data there to make a valid argument. There's not enough data there to convince me to spend £3 on a bottle of shampoo, let alone convince a board to give 20, 50, £100,000 to something.
Yeah.
And this is where I feel like data is really important, because I sat in a boardroom years ago and we were implementing a software system, and one of the directors, probably from the financial side, because it's always the numbers guys, was like, how do we know when it's a success, and how do we measure success? It was very much like, what's the tangible or quantifiable outcome?
Mhm.
Don't give me the emotive, well, it makes people feel better or something. Like, give me the actual numbers. How do we prove it? How do we justify this? And this is where I feel data is becoming increasingly important in our industry.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you brought up 2 points there. So the first one around, the lack of digital literacy in qualification frameworks. There are people who speak much better about this than I will, but I think perhaps those who are developing those frameworks just haven't had the information. So they haven't seen it as being necessary because they haven't seen the data. We're now going into a new age where more and more data is becoming available and it's now becoming a requirement. And you mentioned, these insular companies. You're right. They have so little data that whatever they do probably won't make a statistical difference. As more and more data has become available, we are now moving to that phase where we do need to have digital literate uh, people of all professions. It doesn't just have to be safety. There are other areas. Operations people have to be more digitally literate. Every element, HR people. There is no disbenefit for having a certain percentage of your workforce. Doesn't have to be everybody being digital literate, and it helps if those digital literate people are champions in their own areas. So that, having digital literate people in IT, if you stack your IT department with digital literate people,
I don't know why you keep
get
saying that, Tim.
I don't know either. I don't know either. No. Let's call them tech people.
Yeah.
If they have technical people in one department, the other departments are rarely going to see the benefits.
Yes.
If you've got somebody who's in safety, who is really on the cutting edge of technology, they can see the problems that need to be solved better than some outside department. Same with HR, same with, finance is generally fairly digitized, but same with operations, that if they can see and understand the technology and what can be solved by technology, they're more likely to solve it within their organization. So that was a very good point by you. I suppose the second point to your little chat there was around boardrooms. And you and Crystal Danbury, in a previous episode of this podcast, mentioned that, we tend to go to boardrooms cap in hand, giving, it's ethical to make our people safe, which no longer cuts it. And I say it all the time, but the old adage of you can't put a price on safety probably isn't applicable anymore, because when you talk to some of those senior commercial people and those CFOs, they have got a price in their head. They may not be willing to tell you what it is, but they have got a price in their head as to what safety will cost and what benefits it will bring. And when I came into Intuety, it became kind of my mission to put together business cases for my clients, to show them that they will get an ROI if they undertake some digital transformations within their organization in the safety space.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about Intuity. Well, give me some background to the company first. And by the way, I should say that if you're listening to this podcast but you don't follow me on LinkedIn, then you will probably have no idea. So I'm going to be transparent now. I now work for Intuity. I've seen the light.
Yes.
I've started with the company a couple of weeks ago, but in the interest of the podcast, I'm trying to just remain balanced and slightly impartial, even though that's clearly impossible for me to do, because I thought it was so good that I've jumped in both feet and I've started working for the company. But tell me about the background to Intuity, because I like the background to the company. I think that's really important.
And you're absolutely right. We've got a pretty powerful why, taking the word from Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
The company was formed, I think, around 5 years ago, probably just over 5 years ago, by Simon Wright, who's the current CEO and founder. He worked in construction, particularly in the water sector there, for around 30 years. And he noticed the same thing that most people are noticing, and probably half the people on this listening to this podcast now, that people are dying within construction at higher rates than normal. It's a particularly risky industry. And what's worse, it was for single digit margins. Construction isn't a high margin game. So we were losing all of these people for not really much benefit. What's worse is he saw that the incidents were reoccurring each time. So it's the same profile of incident, just a different company, just a different project. So we weren't learning from these incidents as a, I'm going to say, as a workforce, not as one company, but as a workforce. So there might have been somebody falling off a ladder for a particular reason on this particular site, and getting injured fatally, and then 2 weeks later, someone else falls off a ladder at the other end of the country in exactly the same circumstances. We weren't learning from these mistakes. And he saw a huge opportunity to use technology. And he initially went to IBM and said, "Hey, is this possible?" And IBM kind of just did a little mock-up for it. He then took that away and really ran with it, developed the company to what it is now. What's more important is he developed the AI model. So we've got some pretty brainy people within our organization, data science-wise, and they created an AI model that really does share the data that it collects. It ingests an enormous amount of data and shares it with those who actually need it as they're preparing RAMs or whatever else from a safety paperwork point of view. And now this is our model. I use the collective our. So it is Intuity's model. It's not a bolt-on to ChatGPT or any of those sorts of things. It is Intuity all the way through. It's actually been coined as the large risk model. There's about 18,000 or over 18,000 elements within that. So that's 18,000 hazards, activities, risks, mitigations, and all those sorts of things. But the thing that AI gives you over any other type of data form is the connections. So there's all of these multiple connections. Although there's 18,000 elements, there's 235,000 connections between those 18,000 elements. And it kind of works a bit more like a brain than a traditional data model.
Yeah, I one of the things that I've been trying to work out in my head, and I think we've had this conversation a couple of times, is AI is seen at the moment as an efficiency piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's seen as something that we can already do. Like, as a chartered safety professional, experienced, very well qualified safety professional, we can already do. Now, admittedly, when you get to larger companies, you need a massive team of safety professionals in order to do all this stuff. And, there's a massive cost attributed with that. And it still takes an awful lot of time, right? It'll take me an awful lot of time to review a RAMs and send it back to the contractor and say, you've missed this. And then they send it back to you, and then you send it back, and then they send it back. And there's an awful lot of time and energy has to go in that. And that can be very hard work, right? Because when I'm reviewing RAMs, by the way, for a contractor, I don't want to lead them down a garden path. It's their job. It's not my job.
Absolutely.
It's their job. I don't want to take responsibility for it. So I either sort of say yay or nay. I'll give them a pointer in the right direction, but I'm not going to write it for them. So sometimes you can be like, you can be there for days getting this done, and then all of a sudden you've got a deadline for a job and it's pressing, right? So it's hard, but my point is, it's an efficiency piece, massive benefit, but an efficiency piece nonetheless.
Yeah,
I've been
absolutely
racking my brains over AI and how it becomes a game changer, like how this takes us to the next level, not just an efficiency piece. I say just because actually, there's this argument that, well, if we save, £500,000 here, we can spend that on interventions elsewhere. So we can use that £500,000 to improve safety elsewhere, right? So there's a bit of a game changer. But to me, it's all about this collaboration. I'll go back to what I said about the beginning. It's the collaboration. It's this idea that at the moment we struggle to share learning, and that to me is the biggest thing, is that when you look at a lot of the serious injuries, they're like repeated mistakes that other companies have already learned. And I don't know, it almost goes back to this very original piece of our safety management system. It's like trial and error is almost baked into it. And you listen to the podcast, but I'm going off on some proper tangents here, so I'm sorry. But you listen to the podcast with Crystal Danbury, and we were talking about continual improvement. And I said, can't we just get to the end? And she was like, no, we can't. No, I like Crystal and I respect her a lot, but in my head, I've never let go of that. I'm like, can we just get to the end? Do we have to continually improve, or can we ever just get to the end where it's
Yeah.
just that's as good as it can be? Like,
Yeah.
I'm an
Yeah.
auditor. I go out and do an audit. I don't try and find something wrong. I just go, you're 100%, guys. Well done. You know,
Yeah.
it's interesting, isn't it? I can imagine continual improvement being very attractive in the 70s because there was probably a lot of
Yes.
problems. Like, I've worked in some pretty old factories and they got some issues, you know.
Yeah.
By modern standards, like, we really are starting to get towards this perfect level. I don't know. I know I'm sounding crazy here, but
No, absolutely. And I liken it to something like a Formula One team. They are spending millions shaving fractions of seconds
great,
off their lap time, and that's probably where we're at now.
great.
If you compare us to the Industrial Revolution, it's night and day, but we are still killing people, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
That's the problem. And the road safety people always say towards zero. That's what we should be aiming for. We should be going towards zero from a safety perspective as well.
you know, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I've written something down in front of me. I've written down 1% Dave Brailsford. So do you know Dave Brailsford, the Sir Dave Brailsford? Sorry, I just did get rid of his knighthood there. Sir Dave Brailsford. He took over the Sky cycling team, didn't he? Back in the day, the very famous cycling team that went from very little to winning everything. Lots of goals at the Olympics, Tour de France. You know, they were phenomenal. And what Dave did is he came in and he focused on the 1%. These are world class elite athletes, and he focused on the 1%. So, like,
Yeah.
it was the fact that their truck was dusty. And what would happen is the dust would get into the little mechanical parts on the bike that would reduce the efficiencies, and those efficiencies would have a problem. That's a 1%, massive cost to do that, to get rid of that.
Yes.
But getting rid of that made 1%. And I feel like almost now this is where we are. Like, and there is this potential that AI isn't going to scary when you say it's going to revolutionize. It's a scary thing, isn't it? That makes you think it's going to flip everything on its head. But if you say no, it's going to make everything 1 or 2% better. Now, we know it's a lot bigger than that, but I don't know. If you implement a number of tech solutions, a number of minor changes, that could be the thing that makes this huge difference now.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And yeah, we've got to keep striving for those. Look, if all you do is 1% every week for the whole year, guess what? You are, the law of compounding means you are so much further ahead than you were a year ago. So I think it is worthwhile making those 1% efforts, and they shouldn't be discounted. We've got to, because we've got access to so much data, we can actually see the theoretical benefit that our customers are actually getting. So our users, on average, theoretically, 5% safer after they feed one of their RAMS documents through our model than they would be if they didn't. And, that is a theoretical and academic number, but it's what we have. So if you imagine 5% doesn't sound like a whole lot of a reduction or an increase in safety, but it's going to make a difference. And
it's 1 in 20 jobs, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. If you said to a CFO, look, we can stop 1 in 20 accidents happening, they're probably going to listen, and they're probably going to say, okay, how much is it going to cost me to try and work out that ROI? And, I think the HSC put a non-fatal accident in the UK right now at £12,200. But that kind of covers the gamut. It covers everything from a paper cut through to somebody losing a limb, which is pretty broad and vague.
Probably wouldn't even record a paper cut in a mine in Australia. Tough guys. Do you know what I mean?
Probably not.
No,
Probably not.
Because in context, it's not even going to be recorded, is it?
Yeah.
So okay,
Yeah, so
5% reduction. Does that stand up to scrutiny? Can I test it? Because I don't want to seem like by the way, I'm not a journalist here, so I'm not here to be like critiquing you, but I also, in the interest of this impartiality, I don't want people
Yeah.
to be like, oh, Pete just went along with whatever Tim said just because. So how'd you get to this 5% reduction, Tim?
Look, there are a number of academic papers that actually that we used as a basis for that calculation. So it's not us just plucking a number out of the air.
Yeah.
And there's a whole load of factors. The great thing about using technology, and particularly AI and this advanced technology, is that it can be done. So it doesn't require me to set up an Excel sheet and do all the manual calculations and all that sort of thing. So we can feed an enormous amount of data into the system and have it pull these numbers based on the studies that were given to it. And at the moment, we think that the number is as accurate as it could be, but we would like to ratify that. So we're actually working with a university at the moment to try and understand that and kind of get that number ratified. And there are a number of major stakeholders in the UK who are really interested in whether we can actually confirm that, whether it's 5% or 4% or whatever the number is. They're really, really interested in being able to confirm that, because that's going to guide a lot of the treatments moving forward if we can.
And these are Intuity clients who are working on this product, like FTSE listed, big.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah. That's really
massive clients. Not only that, there's quite a few I'm going to say agencies who are very interested in that result as well, who will give us whatever support we need alongside the university to get that study done and to get the research firmed up.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really cool. I know I'm circling back a little bit here, but I think the really interesting thing for me is collaboration. And I'm not going to try and overly sell Intuity on this podcast, but one of the things I looked at when I started this process last year is data. I got really, really focused on data. I see a lot of very emotive safety initiatives within our industry. It's a very emotive subject, very personal, something that people hold very dear. And you can see that by the emotion that people put into these posts on LinkedIn. And I just kept questioning, like, where's the data? Like, where's the evidence for this? And this is one of the reasons why I started getting, really excited by tech, that we could actually evidence how this is going to make a difference, and prove it, quantifiably prove it, because we can do that in most other industries. We can quantify things. And I think people now more than ever are cynical. If they want a tangible outcome. Business, to me, feels very cynical at times. It's like they want something tangible, a number they can hang their hat on in order to what gives us an actual output, a change, an improvement in the situation. And so I started looking at data in a big way, and I was like, well, how do we collaborate with this data? And then we got onto tech and AI, and then we got into this concept of bad data in equals bad data out. It's like, junk in, junk out. And it's like, well, how do we align the taxonomy, how we record data to then share it on a massive scale, and then who's going to do the analysis, and how do we share the output? This is a massive challenge. And I actually spoke to some companies that we had on, and I was like, how do we get access to the data? How do we go through this and really share learning with the industries that we're working with? This is what's important to me. And then I kind of realized, I just had this light bulb moment when I was speaking to Intuity, that the output of that data analysis is something very simple. It's usually a control measure. That's what happens. You look at lagging indicators. Even if you looked at 1 million accidents, 5 million, 10 million, 1 billion, it doesn't matter. The output is going to be a control measure. It's going to be a really, really deep analysis. And it's going to look at, okay, these are the control measures that we need to implement to stop people falling off a ladder, which is our biggest cause of fatality, right?
Yeah.
It's as simple as a control measure for something so serious. And then I realized that, well, all Intuity does, not all it does, but the one of the biggest things that it does is look at control measures, evaluate them, and recommend them, and share that learning between the organizations. So if one organization implements a control measure for something, and they're a massive multinational, you can be reassured that they've done an awful lot of research on that. They then recommend that to the next person doing that risk assessment, even if they've only got 20 staff. It doesn't matter. They're using the Intuity system. They go, oh, there's a big control measure here. well, we best put that in. That actually makes sense. It's like that shared learning, that shared education, that collaboration piece that I've been trying to find for a very long time. And that's what
Yeah.
that it's that got me really, really excited about Intuity. And if it's rubbish, right, and there's 200 risk assessments after it, and everyone goes, no, I don't like that control measure, and they turn it off, Intuity will go, well, clearly it's a rubbish control measure. But
Yeah.
so if it's this anomaly, but if it's actually got some substance, and a lot of other safety professionals agree, it's almost like
Yeah.
upvoted into the system.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is effectively human moderated by the users. And you know what?
Yes.
If the same goes for if somebody comes up with a new way of doing it, and it makes sense for our AI model to actually adopt that and suggest it to others. Guess what? That is shared, and then as soon as those users start going, actually, that's a really fantastic one. Ticket. I'm going to add that to my risk assessment. It's going to get. I'm going to use the same word you did. Upvoted in the model as being a really really good control measure. So there is no downside. And I suppose one of the great things about our platform, Intuity's platform, is that things are anonymized. So when we feed enormous amounts of data into our model to teach it, we call it ingestion. So when we ingest enormous amounts of data, those sources of data can be anything, even I'm going to say really commercially confidential sources of data. So let's say you have I don't know, incident investigation and lessons learned and all those sorts of things that you would consider you would generally keep fairly close to your chest. You wouldn't want getting out of there.
Yep.
By ingesting them into the system, it's actually taking all of the commercial stuff or all of the personalization stuff out of the document and extracting those insights. So it doesn't matter that Pete broke his foot because of this particular reason. It matters that because this wasn't done, this happened, and this was the result. And that's the thing that trains the AI. It doesn't care about Pete, and it doesn't care that Pete was eating a sausage roll as he did it. It's pulling the right insights out and having them accessible to the most number of people.
So just clarify that one more time. So it'll ingest all the lessons learned, sanitize them,
Mhm.
because it's 27,001, the information security standard.
Absolutely right.
So it
Yep. You have
sanitizes
to be
them,
very
takes
careful
out
there.
any confidential information, and then we'll look at all of the future RAs and go, actually, that happened. That's in our system.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it you know what? The great thing about the system is we told it, I use the collective we, our data science people said these are the things you need to concentrate on: the hazards, the risks, the mitigations, and the activities. It only cares about those things. So if you've got a way out there piece of information in your toolbox talk or in your incident investigation, the model doesn't care. The model only pulls out the information that is pertinent to highlighting hazards, risks, and mitigations to future users.
Awesome. Awesome, Tim. So if someone wants to find out more about Intuity, how do they get in touch with you? I feel bad if I
Uh,
say my details and
yeah,
then.
I was going to say, stay connected with Peter Thomas on LinkedIn. No, look, we publish blogs from time to time on our website.
Yep.
So if you wanted to go to intuity.io, that's intuity.io, and I'm sure you'll put something in the show notes there.
Yep.
That's the best place to start. We've got a couple of little videos in there. We've also got some, like I said, some regular blogs. If you wanted to follow me and Peter on LinkedIn, anything we talk about, and we tend to talk at length. We are not two quiet guys. That'd be a really good spot to keep up to date with both what Intuity is doing and what we think of the world. Those are great places to start. And of course, our LinkedIn for Intuity. We also announce whenever we have a blog or something interesting, or we're going to be at an event or something fun. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to do a shameless plug quick, Tim. So Intuity is predominantly looking at larger organizations, because those are the ones that are going to have the most information to share. Those are the ones that are going to benefit from this massive efficiency piece and economies of scale. And that's where Intuity is going to make the biggest difference, is these large and very large organizations. But one of the things that I'm really passionate about is tech for all. I think our industry is quite unique in terms of safety professionals and the makeup of our profession, our industry, that an awful lot of the work is undertaken by safety consultants. It's not just undertaken by, employed safety professionals within a large organization. And a lot of those safety consultants don't have access to this tech. They don't have access to, all of this information, and therefore their clients can't benefit, their businesses can't benefit. But to me, the most important thing is it's these SMEs that are the ones where we're seeing these serious accidents. These are the ones because they don't have access to a lot of this technology. So one of the things that, that Intuity were really good with is when I came on board, I said, look, we got a real moral duty to share some of this information, and at the end of the day, it's understood it's a business. We've got to make some money. We've got these big clients, but we've also got a number of these really small safety professionals, who they're not big money. They're working hard. They're trying to make a difference, and they don't have access to this tech. So that I've set up mysafetyconsultant.io in order to help consultants advertise their business, in order to take a bit of that weight off of consultants, allow them to focus on, their day job and what they do best. It's working with their clients. And the other thing that we've done is those consultants will now have access to Intuity, but not all at once. There's got to be like a waiting list. It's got to be done as a staged process. And those consultants will have some level of access to the benefits that this technology will offer them and their clients, in order to, make their risk assessments better and learn from these lessons learned that we wish were shared more freely within the industry. So there's my shameless plug. I'm sorry to jump on the back of it, but I just couldn't help it. It's too good an opportunity, because it's too good a piece of tech to not share, to keep hold of. It's got to be shared. It's got to be out there. So if anybody's interested in My Safety Consultant, if you've not heard of it, where have you been? I'm literally pushing it everywhere, but just get in touch with me on LinkedIn, Peter Thomas MSc, or I don't know, I'll put the contact details in the show notes underneath. Tim, honestly, it's been a real pleasure. I know we've had some theoretical, we've talked about a lot of the, these sort of concepts in safety, and it's been a really, really interesting chat. Certainly a departure from our day-to-day conversations around work, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope for anyone listening that it wasn't too salesy. That's my only hope, that we didn't overly sell it. But how passionate I am about tech anyway, so we were always going to be promoting this quite highly, because it's AI, man. I know people. Absolutely. I know it's a dirty word, but it was a dirty word when it was with Google Maps. It's the future, and it's not even the future. It's the present. We just need to get on board with it. So
that's great. No, I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been a good one. We're both very let's call us passionate about the topic. So it made for a great conversation.
Awesome, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Cool, man. That's awesome. If you enjoyed this episode, then please like and subscribe. It really does make a difference to the show. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.